Well, earlier this week, we spoke with Minnesota U.S. Senator Tina Smith for her insights on the women's vote and what inspires her.
Well, I think of the scope of women's suffrage, and I think first of my grandmother, Avis Iden Mason, who was born in 1898. So she was about, she was just a young woman when the right to vote, when women first earned the right to vote. So I think about the difference that made in her life. She ended up being the president of a small community bank in northern Indiana, where she was from, and was a real leader in her community. Imagine if she couldn't vote. And then I think about my mom, who was such a community activist, and she got really involved in the League of Women Voters, which grew out of the part of the suffragette movement, the women's suffrage movement. Of course, that was by the time she was involved in the League, it was in the 1970s. And then here I am in the United States Senate, one of only 26 women in the United States Senate. And the power of women's voices and women's votes to change this country and move this country forward seems more important now than ever. The women's vote is decisive. Women vote in high numbers, but the women that don't vote end up also being really important. We can see that women's views about how to move our society forward, the importance of paid family leave, the importance of living wages for families, the importance of good childcare are things that women care about across the board, especially women who don't vote care about those issues. So the taking that step and making your voice heard and voting, whether it's absentee or on election day, is so important if you care about those issues. Well, I think about it in terms of never taking for granted the right to vote, that the right to vote is something that you exercise, you use. Voting is all about action and using your voice. And in this moment in our country's history, when there are sadly so many efforts to disenfranchise people, to take away their, to suppress their right to vote, it feels particularly important to stand up and to go and to use your voice, not only in the ballot box, but certainly in the ballot box. I became involved in community organizing at the grassroots level, running around with my kids in a stroller and knocking on my neighbors' doors and talking to them about the issues. It was a state legislative race that I first got involved in. I never actually had a big ambition to run for office. I just wanted to be a part of making my community better and connecting with my neighbors. And of course, that led me to working in City Hall. It led me to work at Planned Parenthood on women's health issues, and ultimately it led me to the Senate. So that, at the end of the day, is what motivates me. At heart, I'm a grassroots organizer, and I believe that the best ideas are going to come from people that are closest to the work. And what gets me going is trying to lift up those voices here in Washington.